The winter of 1976 descended upon Oakland County, Michigan, like a suffocating blanket of ice and fear. Detective Sarah Reeves stood at the edge of a snow-covered field, her breath crystallizing in the frigid air. Her eyes scanned the pristine white expanse, searching for any sign of disturbance, any clue that might lead her to the truth. But the snow held its secrets close, much like the community that had been shattered by a series of unthinkable crimes. For children, for lives snuffed out before they had truly begun. And now a fifth had vanished without a trace. Emily Parker, just 11 years old, had disappeared 3 days ago on her way home from school. Her red winter coat, a bright beacon against the colorless landscape, was the last thing anyone had seen of her. Sarah's jaw clenched as she thought of the other victims: Mark, Jill, Christine, and Timothy. Each taken, held for days, and then discarded like broken toys. The media had dubbed the perpetrator the Oakland County Child Killer. But to Sarah, he was simply a monster, one she was determined to catch before he could strike again. As she turned to head back to her car, a flicker of movement caught her eye. A figure, dark against the snow, watching from the treeline. Sarah's hand instinctively moved to her holster, but by the time she blinked, the figure was gone. Was it just her imagination, fueled by sleepless nights and caffeine-driven desperation? Or had she just glimpsed the face of evil? Miles away, in a nondescript house on a quiet suburban street, Timothy Sloan sat in his basement, bathed in the harsh glow of fluorescent lights. His unremarkable features betrayed nothing of the darkness that lurked beneath as he meticulously arranged a series of photographs on a corkboard. Each image captured a moment of innocence: children laughing, playing, living, unaware of the predator in their midst. Timothy's eyes lingered on the newest edition, a school portrait of Emily Parker, her green eyes sparkling with life. He reached out, his fingers tracing the outline of her face with a tenderness that belied his true nature. "Soon," he whispered, a promise and a threat intertwined in that single word. The basement was his sanctuary, his kingdom. Here he was God, deciding the fates of those he deemed worthy of his attention. The rest of the house above remained immaculate, a facade of normalcy that had fooled his neighbors and co-workers for years. No one suspected the mild-mannered accountant of harboring such monstrous secrets. A soft whimper from the corner of the room drew Timothy's attention. Emily Parker, bound and gagged, stared at him with terror-filled eyes. He smiled, a gesture meant to be reassuring but twisted by the madness within him. "Don't worry, little one," he cooed, his voice sickly sweet. "We have all the time in the world." Emily's muffled sobs were drowned out by the hum of the fluorescent lights and the pounding of her own heart. Back at the police station, Sarah Reeves pored over case files, her desk a chaos of papers, coffee cups, and half-eaten sandwiches. The faces of the victims stared up at her, their eyes seeming to plead for justice from beyond the grave. She had promised their families she would find the killer, but with each passing day, that promise felt more like a lie. Her partner, Detective Mike Holloway, approached with a grim expression. "We've got another body," he said, his voice heavy with defeat. Sarah's heart sank. "Not Emily?" she asked, dreading the answer. Mike shook his head. "No, an older victim. Janie Thompson, 13. Found in Royal Oak Park." Sarah stood, grabbing her coat. "Let's go." Maybe this time the bastard slipped up. As they drove to the crime scene, Sarah's mind raced. Why change the pattern now? Was this a copycat, or had the killer evolved? The park was a hive of activity. Police tape cordoning off a large area where a small body lay covered by a white sheet. Sarah steeled herself before approaching. No matter how many times she'd done this, it never got easier. As she knelt beside the body, a flash of red caught her eye. Peeking out from under the sheet was a scrap of familiar fabric. With trembling hands, Sarah lifted the edge of the sheet. There, clutched in the victim's lifeless hand, was a piece of Emily Parker's red coat. The killer was taunting them, leaving breadcrumbs in a twisted game of cat and mouse. As Sarah processed the scene, a crowd had gathered at the edge of the police tape, morbid curiosity drawing them like moths to a flame. Among them stood Timothy Sloan, his unremarkable face a mask of concern as he watched the investigators work. He felt a thrill course through him as he observed Detective Reeves, admiring her determination even as he plotted his next move. In his pocket, his fingers toyed with a small object, Emily Parker's house key, taken from her backpack the day he abducted her. He wondered how long it would take them to realize the significance of its absence. Would they make the connection in time? As the day wore on, Sarah found herself standing in front of the evidence board, staring at the web of connections they'd pieced together. Something was nagging at her, a pattern just beyond her grasp. She felt like she was missing something obvious, something crucial. Her eyes darted from photo to photo, victim to victim, searching for the key that would unlock this puzzle. Suddenly, it hit her: the schools. Each victim had attended a different school, but all within a 5-mile radius. Sarah grabbed a map, marking each school with a red pin. As she stepped back, her breath caught in her throat. The pins formed a near-perfect pentagon, with one school at its center, Oakwood Elementary. She frantically searched the employee records for Oakwood, looking for anyone who might fit the profile they developed. Her heart raced as she came across a name: Timothy Sloan, school accountant. How had they missed this? As Sarah dug deeper into Sloan's background, a chilling picture began to emerge. A loner, never married, no kids. Lived alone in a house he'd inherited from his parents. Worked at the school for over a decade. It was circumstantial, but it was more than they'd had in months. Sarah knew they had to move fast. As the police convoy sped towards Sloan's address, Sarah's mind raced with possibilities. Was Emily still alive? Would they find her in time? In his basement, Timothy Sloan heard the distant wail of sirens. A slow smile spread across his face as he turned to Emily. "It seems our time together is coming to an end, my dear," he said, reaching for a syringe filled with a clear liquid. Emily's eyes widened in terror as she realized what was about to happen. She struggled against her bonds, but it was useless. Timothy approached her, syringe in hand, his eyes gleaming with a mixture of excitement and regret. Just as he was about to plunge the needle into her arm, a deafening crash echoed from above. The basement door splintered as Sarah Reeves and her team burst in, guns drawn. "Freeze!" Sarah shouted, her voice filled with a fury that had been building for months. Timothy's hand wavered, the syringe inches from Emily's skin. For a moment, time seemed to stand still. In that frozen instant, Sarah saw the monster behind the man, the darkness that had terrorized their community for so long. With lightning speed, Timothy spun around, lunging at Sarah with the syringe raised like a dagger. 2 shots rang out, echoing in the confined space. Timothy Sloan crumpled to the floor, the syringe clattering beside him. As her team secured the scene, Sarah rushed to Emily, quickly untying her and removing the gag. The girl collapsed into Sarah's arms, sobbing uncontrollably. "It's over," Sarah whispered, her own eyes filling with tears. "You're safe now." In the days that followed, the full extent of Timothy Sloan's crimes came to light. His basement yielded a treasure trove of evidence, linking him not only to the recent murders but to cold cases stretching back decades. The community of Oakland County began the long process of healing, their nightmare finally at an end. But for Sarah Reeves, the case was far from closed. She couldn't shake the feeling that there was more to the story. As she stood in Sloan's basement one last time, something caught her eye: a small door, hidden behind a shelf, that they had overlooked. With a sense of foreboding, Sarah pulled the shelf aside and opened the door, revealing a small, dark space beyond. Inside, she found a single photograph: Timothy Sloan as a child, standing next to a man whose face had been burned away. On the back, written in childish scrawl, were the words, "Daddy's special helper." Sarah's blood ran cold as she realized the horrifying truth. Timothy Sloan hadn't been working alone. The Oakland County Child Killer case wasn't over. It had only just begun.